Now, before I begin, let me just say that I agree that majority privilege does exist, and it's inevitable. It's always going to happen once any race becomes a majority. And the reason why the privileges do exist is because of our own innate biases. And a possible reason just for me to explain why I think it's always going to happen is basically because if you have heard of this term "for the greater good," where people make decisions for the greater good, yeah, it's basically a utilitarianism concept where it states that the most ethical choice is the one that produces the greatest good for the greatest number of people. So yes, it does make sense in a society where big decisions are supposed to be made. They want to favor those that can benefit the majority, and as such you have privileges which sort of like exclusively benefit the majority. So yes, as the majority you definitely have certain privileges. I'll list out a few right now. So for one, firstly, you have definitely be able to see people of your skin color or your culture being represented on shows or being seen on advertisements, media, posters, etc. Also, your culture will be celebrated more grandly compared to like other cultures. Like for example, just in my own life, I've seen how in my college, Chinese New Year was celebrated on a very grand scale, while my own culture, Deepavali, the festival, was not celebrated as of that extent. I was basically just a few decorations being hung up and there was a mini assembly, that's all. But compared to how Chinese New Year was celebrated, Deepavali celebration was literally nothing much. Yeah. Another point I could say is that you'll be able to communicate with your peers or with your friends in your native language, right? And you don't feel awkward. So assuming like me and my friends are all Chinese, right? If they suddenly start to speak Chinese because they feel comfortable, yeah, you'll be fine because like everybody's speaking Chinese. Only me will be not feeling left out. Now, if we do a role reversal and maybe there's another Indian friend in my clique, while the rest of them are Chinese, and if I start to converse in Tamil with him, the rest of the Chinese people will start to feel awkward, and there will just be like some kind of like awkward vibe in the clique because they don't understand what's going on. So yeah, to have the ability to converse in your own native language without feeling awkward is one of the privileges you get as the majority race. And these are just some of the examples of majority privilege in Singapore. And I know I have not touched on the socio-economic disparity or the social mobility issues that come due to the Chinese privilege, and hopefully I'll talk about it in the next video. Now let's go to the point of why I don't like the term. So going back to Chinese privilege, I feel like it's being used like a blanket term to explain all the inequalities and disparities that are happening in Singapore. And that's not right, you see. Furthermore, this whole privilege talk is resulting in an increased tension among the different races, and it's not allowing for open communication to show how each of our races are experiencing varying experiences in the country. Now, I'm just going to talk about my own experience. So, as a minority, there'll be instances where I'm just talking to my friends and I want to voice out my own concerns, right, in the clique, but I'll be immediately shut down, right? And honestly, at first, I thought it maybe due to my own race, and like they didn't want to like acknowledge my opinions because I was just a minority and like my opinions are sort of like not valued. And after a bit of thinking, I realized that that's probably not the case. Although it might seem like it might feel like it. And yeah, I do agree that sometimes it's just because of your race, but with my friends in particular, I was just thinking, maybe it's not. So I started to think like, why would they do such a thing? Don't they realize that what they're doing is actually hurtful to me and like shutting me down without like acknowledging it? It's like coming out as like a very bad impression onto me. Like it's like really hurting me, and it does seem kind of racist from them because they are putting down my opinions because of my race, right? But then I realized that they probably just lack the information or understanding, because I don't think that they'll continue in such a behavior if they knew how their actions were actually impacting me. Right, I'm pretty sure because these are my friends and they have good intentions and they don't want to hurt me intentionally. So I'm pretty sure that they just lack the information or the info that they're actually hurting me unintentionally. So, and that's when I started to become more empathetic when such situations occur, and I'll instead of retaliating with hate, which is understandable, I would actually try to like talk to them, and like I would basically try to educate them on how their actions have actually hurt me, and hopefully they can do better next time such situations occur. And yeah, honestly, while having such open communications, right, it definitely led to us having a stronger bond because they realized their own mistakes, even though they was unintentional, right? It might come off that way, and we don't want these type of things to continue, otherwise the friendship would become very like broken, I guess. I have no word for it. Yeah. You see, basically most of the majority are really not aware of how their actions can be interpreted negatively, or it might come off in a very like racist kind of manner. And there's basically a term for it, it's called a majority blind spot, where these people have always been hanging around with the majority, or we're hanging around with the same type of people, so they basically don't know how their actions can impact a minority, and no one has come forward to talk to them about it, right? And honestly, if you just educate them in an empathetic manner, you definitely lead to a much better result. rather than how it's currently being done. And that's where basically I think the term Chinese privilege came about, because it was a way for the minority to highlight to the Chinese people about their own privileges and sort of for them to like reflect on their own privileges, right? And then we wanted it to be a way for the majority people to improve themselves as a person, right? But here's where I see the problem rising. The term privilege itself sort of feels like an attack on an individual, and it makes us feel uncomfortable, to be honest, and like to accept our privileges. And I think that we as minorities, we sort of like notice how this thing was making the majority feel uncomfortable. Because whenever I have conversations with my Chinese friends about Chinese privilege, I can see like the faces swing, they start to become very uncomfortable. And now I'm not going to be like those people on social media who be like, check your privilege, or before you even comment, like go and check your privilege. You know, it's sort of like, it's like a direct attack. I'm not going to attack my friends to like accept that you're Chinese privilege, you know, like accept or die, the kind of thing. It's like, it doesn't resonate with me. And honestly, I feel that the reason why a lot of minorities on social media get very like enraged or get very angry and they say check your privilege, as sort of like a do or die situation. I don't get what they're trying to do. Trying to like I get why they do it, because they've definitely faced decades of casual racism and all that like anger and hatred, right? It's sort of like channeled through this term of Chinese privilege, and they like basically like they can't control it, and then they just they check a privilege out, because now we as the minority have a means to make the majority feel uncomfortable, the same way we felt when we experienced racism from them. And this is not the right way to progress, because if you fight hate with hate, you're just going to end up with more hate. And I've also seen on social media that people are getting sick and tired of talking about Chinese privilege and like educating the Chinese friends about it. And they just say like, oh, go educate yourself, you know, just Google, just go and educate yourself. And yes, it is a valid point. It gets quite tiring to sort of like educate people about their own biases and their own privileges, but reality is not going to be like that. You don't expect any individual person who's of the majority race to just wake up one day and be like, oh gee, time to educate myself on my own privileges. Like, that's never gonna happen, unless I have no idea how it's gonna happen. But yeah, so the best way is, honestly, is whenever we see such situations occur, is for us to educate them. We can't get emotionally riled up when discussing such things, because that would lead to not a fruitful conversation. And you will not be able to have an open discussion, because there's honestly a lot of backlash whenever people talk about Chinese privilege from the majority itself, and some people, they really cannot accept it because you're coming with them in a very aggressive manner, and most of the time when such things happen, you become very defensive. And when you become very defensive, you're not willing to accept the other people's opinions. Because like I said, the term privilege itself sort of makes people uncomfortable, and you becoming emotionally riled up does not help the situation. It honestly will make the other person more defensive and not willing to like open his eyes or like accept your point of view. And here's a snippet from a Today Online article. He added that telling the majority of the population that you have privilege, you don't realize it, therefore you're complicit in racism, is not helpful, because it puts everyone into a defensive posture and cuts off conversation. So yes, I've seen this happening a lot. Social media is one way. I've seen it while I'm talking to my friends also. But I will never attack them and go dig deeper, because it's not going to happen instantly. It's not going to be like, oh, I have Chinese privilege, okay, I realize all my privileges. You have to do it very slowly and very over time for us to be able to learn and accept that we have such privileges. Yeah, so now that's where I come to the crux of this issue, where the term Chinese privilege is being thrown around without any context, you know. It's just being used as this like big thing like Chinese privilege, and it's not allowing discussion to take place, and honestly creating more hate. And Wake Up Singapore is not doing it any favors. But yeah, I'll make another video about Wake Up Singapore and how it's actually causing more harm than good. And yeah, it's no surprise that we suddenly see a rise in a lot of racially motivated incidents in Singapore itself, because of the rising tension due to this new term Chinese privilege. Like I said, majority privilege is always going to be present and inevitable. And the term majority privilege itself is a very objective one. Yes, if any race is a majority, you're definitely going to have majority privilege. So it's a very objective term. However, we have decided to add the race component to it, Chinese. When the moment you start to call it Chinese privilege, right, it sort of has like a negative connotation to it. Oh, you have Chinese privilege. Already sounds that you have something inherently wrong with you just because of you being a Chinese. And if you really think about it, that's basically racism. Where there's something inherently wrong with you just because you are an Indian or you're Malay, then that's how all the racism happens. And this is much more scary in my opinion, because this is done under the guise of social justice. So people think that they are doing good, you know, they are fighting for the minorities, right? But it's actually creating more harm than good. And yeah, so that's why I feel it's much more scarier. So yes, if you really want to talk about the varying levels of privilege, you have to be objective and not get emotionally riled up. And it's hard, I understand, but it can be done from a place of empathy. Always come with a point of view where the other person does not know anything, and you sort of have to educate them. Whatever his opinions and everything, is all working with the limited information that he has. And we all know that as a majority race, they have this thing called majority blind spot, and they definitely wouldn't have similar experiences as us as the minority. And so we can't like expect them to understand straight away, right? You sort of have to like slowly bring them and guide them along to showcase their own privileges. Yeah, so I understand that whenever someone says something very triggering, right, it's very easy to get emotionally riled up, but you can't. You have to realize they just lack the information, and we just have to enlighten them. Also, this whole video only applies to those people who don't understand how to use the term correctly. If you really know how to use the term correctly in the correct context and be able to have open and meaningful discussions with the majority race, then yeah, go ahead, continue using the term. But I feel like with what I'm seeing on social media, etc., it does not seem to be like that, and a lot of people are just like throwing the term anyhow, and it's causing more harm than good, basically, because like the emotions take over, and I just see a lot more hatred being formed up and increased tension between the different races. So yeah, stop saying Chinese privilege. If you want, you can talk about it in the majority privilege, and yeah, be more empathetic whenever you have such discussions. You have to understand that everybody is working with the limited information that they have, and their opinions and everything are sort of, they are technically not firmed, they are technically not like solidified, because they are still working with limited information. If you're able to provide them more information, they definitely have the ability for them to change their opinion, right? Also, if you think that I've internalized racism or I'm a fake, please do leave them down in the comments down below. And if you have any other points that you want me to talk about, like, please do leave them down in the comments down below. And I'm more than happy to hear your thoughts, be it positive or negative, because this is a topic that really there's no right or wrong. There's not really a one way fits all, but I'm just saying that in order for more meaningful conversations to happen, you have to stop saying the term like it's almost an attack, Be more empathetic, and yeah, peace.